Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, the public affairs program here at Catamount Radio. We air this each and every Sunday across all 5 radio stations in the group. I'm your host, Brian Collamore. Happy that I keep hearing from folks who are listening each week, and hopefully we'll keep this going for a bit. We talk with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and political arenas. And the goal of the program to inform and make our listeners aware of things that are going on, not just in Rutland County, but throughout the state. And it might be based on a new law or regulation that goes into effect. We want people to know that. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're looking forward already, and it's not that far away, to August and the 179th Vermont State Fair here at Rutland. And we are pleased to have, the president of the Vermont Fairs Association and also the kingpin at the Rutland County Agricultural Society, Robert Congdon, who has a long and wonderful history with the fair. And we want to talk about some things that have come up in the last few years legislatively, first of all, that affect the Rutland Fair, the Vermont State Fair at Rutland, and also all the other fairs that happen to be on the western side of the state, the so-called Lake Champlain watershed. And it's not great news. Robert will be able to bring you up to date on all of that. But we also, later in the show, will talk about the fair that's coming up, the 179th Fair. Maybe some new things that might be in the works. I know it's probably too early to talk about what rides are coming and what entertainment might be coming, but we'll let Robert talk about that. Welcome in, sir. It's great to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for your service to the community and doing this show, and certainly your service in Montpelier. As you are well aware, these issues have been coming our way for a while, and certainly I know we're going to be diving into the 3-acre rule, which many people have read about in the Herald and certainly heard about most recently on WCAX, and there's been a lot of buzz around it, and unfortunately for the Vermont State Fair, we are the poster child, I think, for this region at least, of what's going on and the struggles that it poses.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, there's a word called impervious. And when I say that to people, they kind of look quizzically and say, what the heck is that? It means it doesn't soak up whatever's on top of the land surface at the moment. So anything that's paved, any roof, including gravel roads that don't immediately be able to take that water and put it into the soil, those are so-called impervious surfaces. And quite a while ago, the Environmental Protection Agency, our federal arm of environmentalism, better known as the EPA, said to the state of Vermont, okay, you've got a phosphorus problem in Lake Champlain. The total maximum daily load, the TMDL, has been way up for a long time, and we've got a problem. And that's why, for instance, up in the St. Albans Bay, you have that blue-green algae that forms every year. And even at, I think it's North Beach in Burlington, they have to put out things that say you can't swim today because of the bacteria in the water. So they initiated this situation a few years back. I'm going to say it's probably, 15 years ago, maybe, something like that. And they said to the state, you have a problem that you can fix, and you figure out how you want to do it. With our approval, come back to us with a plan, you will be able to go and enact that. And so what came out was the passage of a law, first of all, and then by rule. And I want to caution people that understand rules do have the same effect as law, but they're not created by the legislature. What happens is when a statute is put into place and signed by the governor, it becomes a law. But then the executive branch of our government, meaning the administration and all its agencies that fall underneath it, are charged with coming up with rules to enact that particular statute. I know this gets pretty complicated, but it's important to know that. And so what happened was the Agency of Natural Resources, that's their purview, and under them is the Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC, and they're the ones that came up with this 3-acre rule. To me, it was an arbitrary number. I don't know why. It could have been 5, it could have been 11, it could have been 2. But they came up with a 3-acre rule. So the law now says if you own 3 acres of impervious soil, meaning it doesn't go away, it just sits there on top, you have to mitigate that by coming up with an engineering study that will allow you to maybe make a retention pond on your property or somehow pump it away for another storage facility somewhere else. So, for instance, I would assume every car dealer, at least those that have 3 acres or more of automobiles and trucks sitting on it, every municipal building, so schools are affected. And unfortunately, the Fair Association found out that strictly by circumstance and happenstance, they were all included in this. So while it's easier for the 4 fairs that are affected, some of them, to address the problem, it's not for the Vermont State Fair because the fairgrounds, and it's about 17 acres. If you add all the roofs, those count as impervious, and all the paved areas, they're surrounded by private property owners. So there's nothing the fair can do except close part of the fair and put this giant retention pond in, which of course would kill the fair, or because of the fines that will be imposed by the state. You know, I did the math. It's probably like $400 a ticket to go to the fair next year. Well, that's not going to work either. So that's where we are today. And that's probably sort of a less than 25 words or maybe more, a lot more than 25 words or less explanation. But that's where we are. And there was a deadline to get your permit in place. And I'll let Robert talk about that. But it's an extremely complicated and unfortunate circumstance that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, you know, it's so. I think one of the things, and you and I have talked about this, Brian, that's really been disappointing is even some retired legislators that were involved with the law back 10, 15 years ago have shared with me, well, we never intended for you to be picked up in this. This was intended for other places. It was intended for other types of businesses and other types of development in the state. And we were kind of collateral damage, I guess you want to say, of this law. And, you know, we all, and I think everybody agrees that we certainly want clean water in the state of Vermont. We all want to see Lake Champlain thrive. It's certainly a treasure to all of us. But the struggles with that and the reality of doing that has to be fair across the board, no pun intended on that, but it has to be in a way that is sustainable and is in a way that is achievable for each one of us that are on there. And, you know, as we've talked about it, it's not just nonprofits like the fair. It's also for-profit businesses that have been caught up in this, some mom and pop type situations, family businesses that are now reeling with, you know, over $250,000 worth of building or impact fees or you name it, that they're going to have to do as well to do this. You know, we are faced with the staggering price tag, you know, all things considered between engineering and the fees that you mentioned we're going to have to pay and the building. And, you know, the current price tag is estimated could be up as high as $3.7 million. That could be low for all we know, could climb from that. And that's just a staggering price. And like you said, we can't jack our ticket prices to the point where people will come out and participate at the fair. They can't afford that. We can't pass that on to our customer. And say nothing about, we've tried to maintain a community event that's affordable for families to come down and experience Vermont tradition. So yeah, there's just so many different pieces to this. There's so many aspects of this that certainly are disappointing. There's certainly a struggle. And as you know, we are certainly engaged with the legislature, especially over the last month and certainly through the rest of this session, to try to come up with some solution for not just the fair, but other, you know, we want to lend voice to others that are experiencing this as well. Yeah.
And there's so many facets of this. I can remember a meeting which was in, I believe, the Nella Fox room at the Rutland Free Library, probably 2014 or 15, which had folks from the DEC come down and meet with the community, in essence. And one of the questions I posed, I stood up and asked, were there enough engineers in the state of Vermont to do all the necessary exploration of this issue and make reports about what business A and nonprofit B could do? And the look I got from the folks at DEC was, I don't think they were even thinking about that. And the answer was no, there weren't enough engineers. I know the Vermont State Fair has hired an engineering firm to do, exploratory work on what would normally be the permit process. Whenever you do something, you seem to have to get the blessing of the state to go ahead and do it. And so first of all, there were not enough engineers in place. Then they put deadline dates in that obviously didn't mesh very well with the fact that there was a lack of availability, so that most of what could happen would be after the deadlines, and then you start getting impact fees adding on to that. So in Rutland's case, again, we had a representative from one of the area businesses that is along both the Muzzy and I'm trying to think of the other Moonbrook yep. Are now, I think, at least part Muzzy, but Moonbrook I know is an impaired watershed, which adds to the mess that we've created. And the representative from the business that we just had a meeting with a few weeks ago is also under tremendous pressure, because as soon as you call something impaired, that doubles the fine that you're going to pay. So in Rutland, the Vermont State Fair's case, Moonbrook does run, or Muzzy Brook, I guess, runs right through the fairgrounds.
Yep.
And there's little, if anything, you can do if it's raining to take care of all the water that comes off the fairgrounds and put it into that brook without flooding the whole thing. So there's a lot of different aspects to this, and we're just trying to find a way forward. There are 3 other fairs that are impacted by this 3-acre rule. Right to our north is the Addison County Field Days. They have applied and I believe gotten their permit and are beginning to do the work necessary. They're in a little bit different situation. They've got acres of land that they don't use right now for fair purposes. And again, you're talking about, except for Champlain Valley, you're talking about fairs that don't operate all year. And so it's hard to gain revenue from something that you're not taking money in all the time. Anyway, they're in a little bit better shape. Their cost is going to be about $500,000, by the way, the Addison County Field Days. But I think there's a way forward for them. Then you take Champlain Valley, which is the biggest of all, and that's up, of course, in Essex. And they also have the ability, because I think they already have a retention pond or 2, and they've got a way to fix their problem as well. And then the third one is in Caledonia County, which is the Orleans Fair, and that goes into actually Lake Memphremagog, but it's still impacted with this 3-acre rule. So those 3 are a little less urgent, I guess, is the way I would put it. It's still onerous, don't get me wrong. They're still going to have to spend money of their own, and these are all nonprofits, to fix the problem. But Rutland, I think, is in a really unique situation, and a bad one, because even though there is supposed to be money available from the state to get all this done, it's sort of like the dog chasing its tail, because until you have a permit in place, you can't take control of the money, and without the money, you can't do the engineering study, and you can't apply for the permit. So it's a circular thing.
Well, and it even gets worse than that, Brian, because the other reality that we currently sit under, and obviously Rutland's going to miss out on this just with our current situation, but those fairs do have access to some ARPA funds that were set aside, which is a blessing. We don't want to belittle that. That's a great thing. Rutland, with where we sit, there's other reasons which we can dive into later that we're going to miss out on that round of money, or at least it appears that way, unless something changes in the next few months of the legislative session. But even the other step that makes this extremely difficult is these fairs are going to have to expend the money. So potentially $500,000, $650,000, I think in Essex's case is what I've heard. They're going to have to come up with that money, whether it's a lender that gives it to them, and then wait for the state to reimburse out of the ARPA money and pay their loan immediately back right off the bat. And that obviously requires good credit. That requires the ability to get a loan. It requires a lender that's willing to work with you, and have that capital up front to pay your contractors in order to get that work done before it goes back. So it's a difficult situation all the way around, for sure. And, going back to your comment about the engineers, and we've experienced that firsthand. We have an awesome engineer. We got a local great engineer working very closely with us and has been phenomenal to work with. But they themselves are experiencing a backup. And my understanding, at least at last conversation I had with them, this whole process, they are 6 to 12 months, in my estimation, backed up beyond the deadlines already. So the state imposed these arbitrary deadlines. The engineers, as you said, there's not enough of them, for one. And second, the ones that there are don't have the ability to meet the deadlines that currently exist. And we're already basically beyond a whole bunch of those. Now, at least right now, it appears DEC is working with that situation and not, dropping the hammer on those businesses, which rightfully so. I think that would be really drastic and really difficult. Make a bad situation worse, but it just puts us in a reality of where we are. And one deadline, I think, of engineering, for example, I believe in the next 3 months, 4 months is coming up on another deadline that a whole nother slew of people are not going to meet. So yeah, there's a lot of difficulty with this, for sure.
And then the most difficult, well, maybe not the most, there's a lot of difficult pieces here. Even if all of this could happen and we could grandfather, for instance, the Vermont State Fair, we still have to go back to EPA at some point and gain their approval before we can make it work. So they ultimately have the final say on whether the project that we presented to them and which they approved is going to go forward, or whether we can tweak it a little bit and make some adjustments, and we don't know that for sure. Obviously, we have a new administration in Washington. Some might think that's a good thing. Some might really be upset about that, and I've certainly heard from people on both sides of that issue. But we do have a new EPA director, and maybe in the end they can gain a little bit more traction by pushing dates out further for all the compliance issues. I don't know. I just know that the fairs were never intended to be part of the issue. And with all due respect, again, to the businesses that are falling under it, even there, some of the impact fees seem unfair to me. If you're on one of those impaired watersheds, like the gentleman that we heard from, it's double what it would be if you're not. The city of Rutland gets involved with the stormwater permit that they're supposedly going to hopefully get made, so that part of that impact fee will be reduced back to maybe 25% instead of 50%. I get so confused with all these numbers and figures.
Sure. And, the other thing, Brian, too, that was really disheartening, I spoke to, and again, it's off the record, so I'm not going to mention any names, but there were former, at least one former legislator that I talked to who shared with me that basically at the time the legislature was urged, this is the right thing. This is what the EPA wants. We need to do this. We're going to figure out the money later. How many times do we hear that in government, whether it's Washington or local government? Well, we need to do the right thing, but we're going to figure out the money later. And now we're later, and the money was never figured out, and the money's just not there. And I think if we were in a cash-rich situation where there was this huge pot of money sitting there that we could help out every business, whether they're for-profit or non-profit, and just take care of this, I think everybody would be excited and say, yeah, let's get it taken care of. But that's just not a reality. And I don't think, I know it's not a think. We know that we're not in a situation where the tax burden in this state, that the taxes that are already being paid by the people are in many people's estimation, excessive. We've had that conversation. I'm in local government as well, in my town. The fact that, the tax burden is already a heavy burden to lift. So, can the people of Vermont be taxed to get this problem solved? And the answer, quite frankly, is no. There's not the tax base there to answer that question. So,
all too often, and I say this without any disparaging meaning, the legislature puts into play certain rules, regulations, laws, statutes, however you want to phrase it, without thinking too far ahead And so the unintended consequences become pretty apparent within a short amount of time. In other words, we goof up a lot and we have to go back and fix stuff instead of just sitting down and thinking about it. Okay, what if this happens? What if that happens? How is this law going to impact people? And I think this is one that you could point to as an example of that, unfortunately. I'm certainly in great sympathy with our business community as well. And as you said earlier, and by the way, we're talking to Robert Congdon, who's the president of the Fairs Association in Vermont and also president of the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which runs the Vermont State Fair at Rutland. But we just sometimes don't take enough time, I think, to think things through, unfortunately. And nobody that I know of wants to pollute Lake Champlain and just keep throwing our contaminants in there and ruin the lake. That's not even a question. The question is, okay, we have to do something to fix that. The agricultural community, by the way, especially in Addison and Franklin counties and Chittenden County as well, have done, I think, their best to reduce the phosphorus getting into the lake. All kinds of practices, the no-till stuff and the injection of manure into the soil. All of that, I think, has helped. The tile drainage also, which puts stuff underground, has helped. And so I think the farmers are doing their part. And I don't think anybody, again, wants to see any bad effects happen to the lake. But the question is, okay, what is the most intelligent way to address that? And it's going to take time. It took time for all the legacy phosphorus, which is sitting on the lake bed right now, to get introduced. And it's going to take a long time to fix that. And this sort of quick fix kind of idea simply doesn't work a lot of times. And I think that's where we are. I don't see any other way to phrase it.
Yeah, I think you're right, Brian. And, speaking as a farming background and still living on the family farm, I think the reality is that you're absolutely right. And I think for a long time, the farmers took a bad rap over this issue. And in many cases, a bad rap that they didn't deserve. And the reality is our farmers, our farming communities, and especially having friends up in Addison County, they've gone to extreme measures, and many, again, imposed on them by the state. But they have all done their part to comply. And I think you're right. I think that we owe an appreciation to them for what they've done and how far they've gone with this. And the flip side of this, too, is the law does not have any understanding, I think I would say is the proper word, for the fair, for example, and other places like it, where, yeah, maybe we've got all these roofs, maybe we've got a lot of asphalt, but we've got a lot of green space. We've got massive amounts of space where water naturally leaches, or the water runs through lawns for many, many feet before it even reaches the brook. And what kind of natural filtration are we getting already without a system in place? As you've alluded to, the fair, yes, we have events most every weekend during the busy season, so to speak. Right now, we're snow covered and we're closed. There's nothing going on aside from the snowmobile festival a week ago. Which what kind of consideration is there for that fact? And the reality is, right now there is none. There's no consideration for the fact that there is green space, there's natural lawn, there's natural leaching that occurs. It's arbitrary. We took a drone over your property. We saw this much rooftop. We saw this much gravel. This is it. And it's slap a formula together and here it is. You've got 16.9. Okay, 16.9. This is the formula. This is what you owe. This is what you've got to treat. And there's no real consideration for the site. And that's something that we've argued for a long time. I know many other business owners have argued that for a long time. Why can't we look at each site individually? Why can't we look at the pros and the cons of each site? In the case of the fair, okay, maybe we've got, and I'll just throw something arbitrary out, okay, let's look at the old Mandigo Arena and say, okay, there's a lot of water that comes off that roof. We're going to target treating that area. And this area over here where, yeah, you've got two, cattle barns, but the water runs off the roof and goes into a lawn, we don't need to worry about that. We need to worry about really where there's, real impact. I think businesses, and I think in our case, the fair would certainly at least see some understanding in that type of a situation. And right now, the law doesn't take that into account. And that's, I think, one of the most frustrating pieces. That's the extremely frustrating part. And the impact fees that we pay, if we end up, which at this point with the way the law currently is, we're going to have to pay impact fees. Those impact fees go into a pot that are going to then be able to be applied for by, let's say a business is going to move into the state, and I throw out, maybe it's a big box store of some sort, moves into the state and they want help building their permit, getting their permit and building a stormwater treatment facility for their box store. They can apply to that pot of money that our money went into, that we paid, and they could benefit off that for the building of their system while we got penalized in our process. So there's a lot of unfairness. There's a lot of things that need to be considered. And certainly it's a headache that we've been dealing with for quite some time.
We're talking to Robert Congdon from the Vermont State Fair at Rutland, and also president of all of the fairs. And we are going to take our first break here on Catamount Community Connection, and we'll be coming right back. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection. I'm your weekly host, Brian Collamore, and with me is Robert Congdon, who's president of the Fair Association of Vermont and also president of the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which brings you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland every year and has since, 1846. So even before the Civil War. I have to think it's the oldest fair in the state, and we're looking forward to the 179th fair coming up in August. I did want to mention a couple other things. We've been sort of getting into a deep dive with this 3-acre rule, which I still find a lot of people have no idea about it. There are somewhere around 700 people on this list that the A&R folks came up with that would be under this. And I don't think anywhere near even half of those people have made application for a permit. Some of them may not know about it yet. I find that kind of hard to believe if you have a 3-acre piece of land. But some of them are, at this point, just going along their merry way and not reacting one way or the other. But one of the things that I found curious was that the survey that was done was by drone. So they put a drone up in the air. I don't know how far up they go, and then looked down and began counting how many acres that was. And to me, it would be hard for me to distinguish between something that was impervious and something that wouldn't be impervious at a certain height. But that said, that's how they came up with the answer. And in Rutland's case, again, counting the roofs and all of the paved area, it comes out to a little over 16 acres. And you multiply that times whatever the impact fee is, which I think are fines, not impact fees. And that's where the number comes from. So that's one thing I just wanted to mention, that nobody actually walked around the Vermont State Fairgrounds and made a determination about some of the things we've been talking about. And again, the added peril here is that Moonbrook and Muzzy have been declared impaired watersheds to some degree, and that adds to the impact fees. And that means in some cases the emphasis is more on retention than it is anything else. And if you're involved with the Vermont State Fair, you only have so many acres that you can do. So what do you close all the rides down just to have the fair? Well, that doesn't work too well. You build a huge retention pond where the track is. That doesn't work well either. So there's only so many options for the Vermont State Fair. But I wish that DEC would come down. I think you reached out to them, and for whatever reason, they haven't accepted your most kind invitation to come down in person, right? Yeah,
two things, Brian. I think whether it was drone or satellite, one or the other is what they were using to determine. You're absolutely right. And actually, just to give you an example, our number was higher until our engineer came onto the ground and actually walked around, and our number actually came down when the engineer came in, from where it was. It was actually higher. So you're right. I mean, this aerial, whether it was drone phone, whether it was satellite, those numbers were not realistic when it came down to it. And I think a lot of the sites in the state are certainly probably going to find that. The retention piece is really difficult, and you've already mentioned the fact we don't have the ability to put in giant ponds. We, especially in the last few years, as we have grown back, almost every square inch, it seems, is being taken up by either parking to get people onto the grounds, or we've continued to expand back. We've expanded the ride area back to getting more in. We've expanded more agricultural exhibits. We've expanded more grounds acts. So those areas that, maybe 5-10 years ago could have been discussed and looked at and said, well, maybe we could put a retention pond here. It's not the reality anymore. And the areas we do have that we could possibly talk about that. People know the back 40 when I mentioned that, because some of them have had to park out there for overflow the last couple of years. That's, okay, let's talk about that. Maybe that's a site we could do something. It's so far away. It would cost so much money to put the piping and put the pumps and put everything in to get it out there. Our engineers looked at it and said, okay, that's a great site, but there's no way to get the water there feasibly. We can't actually pump it that far. So what we've gone to, and this is really, where it gets super expensive, we've had to talk about and go to underground retention systems, which is gravel and culverts that are basically cut in half to create this grid of, I call them cells for water to be able to go into. One of those would be a massive portion of the oval where people park. Now, the beauty of those are they are underground, so we could still use that area for parking, which is good. I mean, we don't lose the ground area, but the expense of constructing that is astronomically higher. I mean, we're talking an area probably based on the maps that I've seen. I would guess a 2-acre square at least, if not 3. That would just be this massive, as you say, open retaining pond. That's a lot of cars when it comes to fair and other events. We use the oval for other events as well. So the parking situation would get drastic. Our neighbors already, certainly take what cars they can. And I know it's been, good for them to be able to do that on Park Street, especially. Yep. And that's a great relationship that they have with us. But feasibly, the car parking that we would lose, there's not enough parking in the neighborhood to even pick up what we're going to lose. So it would create bottlenecks other places as well. And then another one of those retention areas would have to go over in the ag area near the Mandigo Arena. And again, it's another parking lot. It's another massive area that's got to be excavated, dug up. And of course, when we're talking about these areas, we're not even beginning to talk about digging up electrical lines, digging up sewer lines, digging up water lines that, in some cases are really been there for a long time. And it could get real interesting if you start digging in a lot of areas. So those are really just troubling parts of this, and that's what the engineers are for, to look at those struggles. And for our site, they've puzzled over it for quite some time, and as well as it baffles me. Because of the impaired watershed, we are being told, well, you need to focus more on retaining this water, not necessarily just the treatment to get it out, which adds a whole nother layer to the situation. It also creates this situation where when we are being told to retain the water for at least 24 hours before it gets released, these areas have to be really massive. These have to be really large structures. And that's where we start getting into the tunes of millions of dollars. We're not talking, the money's not in the piping to get it there. The money's in the structure when you build the structure, and the structures are huge. And again, millions of dollars easily.
What I would urge people who are listening, this is the 3-acre rule that we're talking about. If a nonprofit or a for-profit business owns 3 acres or more of what is called impervious soil, meaning it doesn't have the ability to soak up and we're not talking about wastewater here. We're talking about stormwater. I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning. There's a huge difference between the two, obviously. We're just talking about when it rains, where does the water go? That kind of thing. But what I would do is urge anybody listening to please contact their legislative representatives, whether that's in the House or the Senate, and urge them to get a hold of folks at the Agency of Natural Resources. And so I can be talking to people in Addison County at this point. I don't know as our signals go as far up as Chittenden or Franklin counties, but those folks are all going to be affected by this, and also Caledonia County, and just urge them to at least be aware of the problem that this has caused, especially with respect to our state fairs. But I got to tell you, there's probably a lot of businesses that are going to be very negatively impacted. And so we need to all be aware of this and try our best to find a way forward. The other piece of this I'll mention, and then we'll get off this because I think we've pretty well done our business to get as deeply into it as we have. Going forward, it's not going to be 3 acres anymore. It's going to be a half an acre. So if you are in the process of deciding whether to put in a housing development and it's a half an acre or more, you will now fall under these same provisions that you're going to have to take your stormwater from the roof or the driveway or whatever it is and figure a way to mitigate that getting to Lake Champlain with whatever contaminants it might have. And it's so what is now, 3 acres is 3 acres, but a half an acre is even more of a problem, I think, for a lot of people. So we'll leave it at that. If you certainly have questions about it, you can certainly email me or call me, and all my information is on the website under Vermont Senate. So let's talk about maybe a little bit more pleasant topic. The upcoming Vermont State Fair, the 179th, is coming up in August. And traditionally, people look forward to some entertainment acts, some agricultural ground acts, going into the dairy section and all that. I love the racing pigs. I won't tell you I don't. I think it's just the funniest little thing that I've ever seen. And I'm hoping they'll be back. And I love the Dairy Center and the Maple Museum and the Maple, because there's nothing I love more than buying pound after pound of maple candy and taking it home. So that's where I am. So tell us a little bit about maybe some good things that are coming up in August, Robert.
Absolutely. Well, the 179th Vermont State Fair will be August 12th through the 16th. This year's installment, and as you have already alluded to, Brian, we are well underway with the planning, getting things going here, and trying to get things firmed up, so to speak. I can speak a little bit to the grounds acts that are coming back, and actually we have really developed a cycle now where we're rotating, which is nice. Sometimes fairs get the rap for saying, well, you got the same thing every year. We come down every year and it's the same thing. Well, we've really worked hard to get into that cycle where you're not seeing the same thing every year. So people will remember a couple years ago we had the Magic Act, the Illusions by the Blooms, will be back this year, and they also have the Roaming Dinosaur. So they are on a cycle with us now, and we're looking forward to that. This year, we also have the Stingray encounter and the shark encounter, which is going to be interesting. So they come in and they've got tanks, and it's going to be the ability for the public to see these animals up close and experience those. Those are going to be really neat, and I think there's going to be a lot of buzz surrounding that this year. We're working as well. There will be racing pigs, so I can tell you that as well. Our hearts are with our current racing pigs person from the last several years. Has got some health things going on, so our thoughts are with him right now. And we do have a different company in just for this year while he's getting his health needs taken care of. So we have kind of a stand-in, so to speak, but we obviously stepped up and said we got to have the racing pigs. We got to have racing pigs. So we are looking forward. It'll be a little bit of a different outfit, but they're going to be here. We also have horses back. So they came back for the first time in many years last year, and they're going to be here again this year. And then one of the other new ones that I'm excited to see, and I've seen pictures and I've seen videos, but we've booked with them, is to have Agri Golf. Now that's Agri Golf, which means it's a miniature golf type setup that they bring into your fairgrounds, and it's going to be, I forget how many holes of miniature golf that is going to be included in your ticket. You're not going to get charged extra to do that. So if they're open, and they'll have hours of operation within our hours, that's something you can get in line and you're going to be able to experience. And it is agriculturally themed, like with agricultural questions, trivia, that type of thing is involved in it, and certainly fits into the mission of the Agricultural Society, because we're supposed to be educating the public as they come onto our site in agriculture. So AgriGolf is something that I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see what they bring. We also have the Pirate Man Dan will be back, and he's definitely been a hit the last several years, and he'll be roaming the grounds with his pirate ship, as well as he does at least one show a day at his home base on the fairgrounds, and we're excited to have him as well.
And I'm sure all the local food outlets will be well represented. I mean, so many people you talk to, they go to the fair to, eat what they probably don't want to eat the rest of the year, but that's what makes it fun and different.
That's right. We've worked really hard to bring in a great variety of food, and I'm sure this year, contracts are in the process right now of being drafted and going out. It's usually, again, February, March that we work heavy on those for our food vendors and those that we're on the route for. So we're excited for that. We're working at that, and I'm sure it'll be a well-rounded selection for everybody that comes down.
Probably too early to talk about entertainment, though, right?
Well, we know for sure we're going to have a demolition derby. We're working on firming up the other entertainment as well. We can also confirm at this point that flat track motorcycle racing will be back again. That was something that quite frankly, I think the public was not prepared for what it was. I don't think there was really clear expectations of what we were bringing to the area. And so we've signed a contract for another year. We're hoping for a great turnout for that event. It was fun. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, we had on the back stretch and on the front stretch people doing over 100 miles an hour on their bikes, and really impressive. And especially to see that track lit up again and actually have something under the lights at the fairgrounds was really special. Did something special for me, for sure. Yeah. And we're excited to have RPM Motorsports coming back again, and they're going to be participating in doing that on Friday night of the fair. We're still working with the Paramount on our music act, or acts, plural, I should say, depending on how things work out. And we're also working on finalizing up, hopefully, and I don't want to jump too much to conclusions, but hopefully a rodeo is going to be back, and hopefully something else we haven't had in a while we're working on. So can't talk about that yet, but we're working on something else that hasn't been on the fairgrounds in a few years that we're hoping we can see again.
Okay. And, of course, since it is a family fair, all the rides for our little guys and gals, I don't know which rides to call out, but the ones that are all the kids love, right?
Well, yeah, I think the big thing was, Brian, when we started to really rebuild, and it's no secret, we had to go through a rebuilding phase, and obviously we're still building. We want to build every year. Our ride company said they would build with us. That was the promise, and they've fulfilled that promise. They have brought in more, and people will notice the last couple of years, there's definitely been more than what we had, say, when we changed dates almost 10 years ago now. I think this will be the 10th fair, actually, on the new dates. So the ride company has upheld that part of their promise. We are partnered again with Amusements of America, who subcontracts as well. We've got two ride companies. I'm not sure how many people knew that, but two ride companies come together to do our fair. So we also have kind of a local outfit, which is Miller Amusements out in New Hampshire, and they'll be here with Amusements of America again. And they've done a great job, and I think that, we could potentially see, and like you say, it's too early to know for sure, but some cycled in rides that we haven't seen in a while. They seem to do a good job at that. The kids area has definitely grown the last several years, where they've brought in more, especially, we refer to them as the kiddie rides, Kiddie Land.
Yeah.
That's certainly something that we are confident we're going to, continue to see growth and see, all of the spread that people are looking for.
We're talking to Robert Congdon, who is the president of not just the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which brings you the Vermont State Fair each year, but also the Fair Association in Vermont. And are there 12, I think, or...
Yeah, the numbers changed a little over the last couple of years. I think we're thereabouts, 10 to 12, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So we need to take our second break here on the radio, and we'll be back with Robert Congdon in just a moment. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly public affairs program. And today we're talking to Robert Congdon from the Vermont State Fair, and they bring you this show every week. The dates this year, August 12th through the 16th, so those 5 days. And that will be the Vermont State Fair's 179th fair here in Rutland. And so we talked a little bit about the 4-acre or the 3-acre. I wish it was 4 in a way. The 3-acre rule, and what I hope other legislators and the public will come to realize is a very serious issue. And I hope we can find relief, certainly for our own Vermont State Fair, but even for some of our businesses in the area. And then we talked a little bit about some of the new things coming up during those 5 days in August. But it is something that I think is a treasure, the Vermont State Fairgrounds, because we do use it in other months of the year. And I know I have an affinity for the rave folks, the Rutland area vehicle enthusiasts. Their show is, gosh, I don't want to show my age, but I can remember, I think it was 78 was the first one. And that's just been going and going and going. And with 1 year exception, we went up to Pico and just didn't work out. And so it's been at the Vermont State Fair ever since. But I know there's some other events coming up preceding that. That's usually the second full weekend in July, the Rave Car Show. What else is coming up in the interim?
Well, so, Brian, a lot of people don't necessarily realize how much fairgrounds are used outside of those 5 days. We, much like Essex is the same way, the fairgrounds are used year-round in many cases, aside from probably the dead of winter where we are now, where we are constantly having people on the grounds. The state police use our facility quite regularly for trainings. The Rutland City Fire Department comes down and uses our facility for trainings. But then, of course, lots of other events. 4-H has several clinics and shows that we release as well that are going to take place. The first horse clinic this year in the Equine Center is actually going to be Memorial Day weekend, is when the 4-H folks will be down, as well as we have our Spring Fling horse show for the Vermont State Fair Equine Center Mother's Day weekend. We, again, this year are going to kind of be bookended by Vintage Market Days. They kind of kick things off at the end of April. They're the last full weekend of April, and then they really kind of close things out for us Columbus Day weekend in October. And those have just been spectacular for our area. I think that, the influx of folks that are coming, spending money in Rutland City, staying in hotels, if you, and I have, walked through our parking lot during that event, yes, you see Vermont cars, but Vermont cars are in the minority when that event's in town, which is really a testimony to the business and what can be brought to the economy with different events. And I know, other places experience that. Art in the Park experiences that, for example, and those are all great events that bring people in, and that's something that certainly we want for our economy. So we like to think that we're playing a big part of that by doing that event, and that's going to be, those two events are going to be taking place this year. As you mentioned, the Rave Car Show, second full week in July. As always, the first weekend in June will be a Relay for Life. They've been on the fairgrounds for a number of years now. Certainly extremely valuable to our the fight against cancer. Rutland County has been a strong location for Relay for Life for many years now, and raised a massive amount of money over those years. So we're excited to continue to partner with them. They're going to be on the fairgrounds as well. We also, that next weekend, so the second weekend of June, that Sunday is the For the Love of Kids car show, another car show, and the beauty of all the car shows that we have, as you know, Rave and Ted with For Love of Kids, and then later the Euro car show after the fair, they all support nonprofit foundations. They all raise money for very important causes, whether it's to fight disease. For the Love of Kids raises money for the Shriners Hospital. These are big events to help really bring out that philanthropic spirit that we have in this area. So all of those are booked. All of those are going to be taking place. We believe at this point that we are going to have another camper show in the infield. So that's been happening now for a few years. So we're looking forward to hopefully buttoning that up and have that here. 4th of July is scheduled for the 4th this year. So Independence Day, of course, will be the Summer Smash, which I think everybody looks forward to coming out. That will be our first Demolition Derby this year. So we're reevaluating and kind of recircling around. We used to have an early Demolition Derby in May, and we decided this year to focus in on the July one and the fair Demolition Derby, and then there will be a Fall Bash again this year, which will be taking place early October, actually before Vintage this year. It's going to be the first weekend of October. We're also looking at the commercial truck show, which for this area last year got off the ground actually while the Monster Truck Show was here. This year they're going to their own weekend in September. They really were... there'll be more information coming out about that, but it was really popular, and I think I just said September, and it's actually going to be early August that's going to be happening, so I got my months mixed up. But they're going to be bringing out the truck drivers and the companies that really commercially do a lot for us as a community. We see these big trucks driving our city streets and driving our highways, whether they're, towing agency, whether they're a hauling agency, you name it. There's all kinds of different businesses, the big names that you are so used to hearing that sponsor many things in our community, whether it be the Fabians or Casella or, the towing companies that are all around. We've got a lot of these businesses, and they don't ever really get a chance sometimes to experience us appreciating them as they bring in their, trucks and show them off and go ahead and take part in an event for them. And that's been something that's been exciting to see develop as well. So you can see, folks, that the Vermont State Fairgrounds is being used to the fullest extent they can. There isn't much you can do, well, except for the snowmobile, which we'll reference here in a second. Once the ground is frozen and there's snow on it, there's only so many things you can do. I think this has to be a very good snow season, right? It was. I think we've had 2 snowmobile shows now that we didn't have any snow for, and this year certainly made up for that. The participation was great. We had a great number of exhibitors that came down, also got to do their little parade around the track, and it's grown each year, and it's been exciting to see that, and we certainly had a great event about a week ago. And actually this year it was exciting for us to partner with Winterfest, and we were one of the first events of Winterfest for the city. And that's been a great, we were excited to have that partnership, and hopefully we can continue that as well going forward. So we have about a minute or two left, Robert, and we're talking to Robert Congdon, who is the president not only of the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which brings you the Vermont State Fair every year, but also the other fairs around the state. We think there's somewhere around 10, 11, or 12, depending on, I realize things change all the time. Is there any, I'll just go on a personal note, go to the fair this year, please, attend it, and show your support. It's definitely on its way back up in terms of attendance, and we're praying for, if it's got to rain, have it happen at night, and have every day be sunny, and about 82 would be perfect, right? That's right. 70 to 80, that's the prime range, I think, for all of us. Yeah.
Anyway, I'll just add that. But you have about a minute if you have anything else left that we haven't covered that you just want to give someone a shout out or anything else.
Well, what makes the Rutland County Agricultural Society viable, what helps us survive is the businesses that support us, the community that supports us, and we can't say thank you enough to all of those. Some that come immediately to mind, of course, is just the partnerships we have, our flagship sponsor, Diamonds and More. There's so many different groups that come out and people who give of themselves, my board that gives of themselves. We're all still volunteers. We're not out here making money. We're not out here getting rich. We are doing this for our community and wanting to see just a great opportunity for Rutland to come out and see. And it's been a blessing and really good for us to hear the positive feedback we've gotten from the public that has come out. And like you said, I just urge everybody, come out, come see us. We do this for you. It doesn't operate without you. So to all the public, to all the businesses, we look forward to your partnership in the coming year and enjoying and welcoming you all in August 12th through the 16th for the 179th Vermont State Fair. Okay.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I had the unique pleasure of knowing your grandfather, who was just a great, great guy. We go all the way back to the origins of the Royce Mandigo Arena.
Sure.
I guess we still call it that, even though it's not. Well, it's still an arena, but we don't have ice in there anymore.
That's right, yeah.
But he was such a great, great guy and a great leader, and I got to say you are following in his footsteps for sure, Robert. And I want to thank the Agricultural Society, too, because I know sometimes that can be something else you don't have to do. You volunteer to spend time at meetings and planning and all that kind of stuff. But I think it is very important to the community that we continue to show support. We're going to try not to put you out of business at the state level with this 3-acre rule. I'm hoping that we can grandfather you as you were for many years with all the other water quality issues. And again, it's important for people to know we're not asking because we want to just spoil Lake Champlain. It's just very important that we keep the Vermont State Fair going, too.
Well, thank you, Brian, for all you do. And again, thank you for this service that you do to the community as well. And it's great to join you every time. And it's a lot of fun.
All right. Hope to have you back soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you. And we will see all of you next week on Catamount Community Connection.